Oh, hey, Doothers, it's me again. So, yesterday, I did a first pass, I think, about labels and how we get hung up on what we name ourselves, what we name each other. I think that we get real stuck on that. And that's just one of the topics that I feel needs more. It needs like there's more to deal with, there's more examples, there's more observations to provide. And, maybe that's overthinking it or over-explaining it. So, and I'm not doing that today. Instead, I'm going to have a different conversation about another topic that I think needs a lot more than what I'm going to kind of be able to do here in the car without a lot more reading, a lot more notes, practically a script, I suppose, to get through it. Or again, maybe it's something that requires more writing on my part and reading on yours. So, but I've been trying to get this out a few times, and this is probably my fifth or sixth attempt to do this. And to be honest, now I'm wondering if I actually did put out a paltry first pass at this or not. So I will have to go back and look, see if my descriptions are at all informative in this regard. I should really find a better way to keep track of this topics. But today I want to talk about faith. Not George Michael and definitely not the Limp Bizkit version, but faith. And I think the struggle for me is that when I started this thought process, a year or two ago, faith to me still was really relegated to religious faith, which is how I grew up with it. Faith to me was faith in the Bible, faith in God, faith in Jesus and the Holy Spirit, right? All of that, all the evangelical flavor of Christianity for, close to 20 years of my life. So, and I've actually been out of the faith longer than I was in it, which just means I'm just that old. But I think that it's important to understand the differentiation between the concept of a religious faith versus a semantic usage of the word faith. And what I mean is, to some extent on a Venn diagram, right? If we put faith right in the middle, we're going to have circles that include things like hope. We're going to have things that include religion, of course, and then even delusion, right? There are things you can believe in. And there are also, specific kind of topics. You want to look at faith in medical profession, faith in politics, right? So something that you believe in, or how you believe in it, or what level you believe in it, right? Which goes back to the labeling thing where we are constantly trying to explain, what we are. Because again, in terms of having a label, it allows for a kind of shortcut. Like, I was raised evangelical Christian. Well, what does that mean? Well, what it meant at the time is not what it means today, which also becomes problematic because based on the materials I'm reading and the kind of surveys that are out there, the bulk of the people who identify as evangelical Christians voted MAGA. If you watched any of the more prominent preachers in that space, they're pro-MAGA, they're pro-Trump. There's a reason the white male Christian nationalist movement in broad strokes appealed to people of faith. The more evangelical, the more aligned they felt to the things that were being said by that movement. Whether the people espousing those statements were telling the truth or just trying to, assuage their audience. I obviously have my opinions. I think by and large, Trump could give a shit, just whatever got him voted. But there are others who definitely believe certain things. I mean, and there are some elements to it that I grew up with in the church. The idea of the victim mentality. I mean, when I was in church, that's really when things started with the attack on Christmas and not being able to say Merry Christmas anymore. I think Rush Limbaugh started that. I mean, he's a real catalyst into the kind of right-wing media grift of what would become Fox News as well, of what it would turn into. And Trump. I like to believe that Trump is the pinnacle of that insipid movement. I'm not saying it'll necessarily die out after whatever happens with him, but I don't know that it'll be the same without that kind of cult of personality he developed, or still has, like, whatever. Well, it's a lot of turkeys. Holy cow! So yeah, faith. I think faith can have a real bad rap. I mean, for me, for a while after I turned away from it, it was a 4-letter word for me, and I definitely had a militaristic view of people that still adhered to the faith, that they were missing out, they were wrong, that they were, ignorant or willfully ignorant. And it was a childish perspective. I think I don't remember I talked about it before, but, growing up in a home where we had to be right, and we were right, and everything we were doing was right, and everything other people was doing, was wrong. So there was still that sense of self-righteousness, and then I felt like I had achieved the right way of thinking, so everybody else was, of course, doing it wrong. It's hubris. It's the kind of thing a child would do. A teenager especially seems to be prone to that kind of mindset. I've had to be humbled by just existence and just by being shown what is. And, part of not being sucked into the emotion of it, but to get to some of the reason of it and being more reasonable about it and less reactive. Yeah, faith for me was not a good thing. And like I said, up to even up a couple years ago, I still kind of just left it alone as that word, as that intention, as that its primary usage. And I think it's just, for some people, that is its primary usage. It is primarily how they would leverage that word in a sentence, in a description of themselves even, and how they would label themselves. I have faith in whatever. And I think a softening of the perspective really just allows me to tackle the issues that I may have with not the label, but what certain things may represent, or really what the ideas are that I have a problem with. Right? People have faith in a deity. Yeah, I disagree. Right? I haven't proven it. I find the claim to be pretty spectacular. That would require some spectacular evidence. Just like, as far as faith in science, right? Faith in physics, faith in the math. Hey, the math says we have multiple dimensions. Like, well, my understanding is in order to help prove the wave theory of string theory. I forget now how that all plays out. But in order to prove kind of that concept, you need multiple dimensions for that to work. So is it that the math proves out that we have multiple dimensions, or that the math proves it out because it helps support this other idea? Right? Look, science, the idea behind the scientific method in and of itself is to really prove yourself wrong. And physics and mathematics, I mean, look, it doesn't work if it doesn't work. Right? So as much as they say the math works, until they're able to prove that there is another dimension, I mean, physically, especially in this talk about a multiverse where, there's a universe where I could be skinny and or fit, right? That's another ludicrous claim to me that requires an amount of credible evidence that I don't think they can provide. So for me, some of this stuff, even in the scientific communities, it does require faith. But the level of evidence available in a lot of different other areas of science and a lot of the studies that are provided really kind of shuts down a lot of arguments against certain things. Right? As an example of where I find faith to be problematic is people who really espouse young earth creationism and that dinosaurs lived at the same time as people, things that we demonstrably proven could not have happened. Just the different dating scenarios. And I know that there's pushback about carbon dating having a problem. Look, you have to be able to date something using an appropriate dating method based on the materials you have available, right? So just saying carbon dating isn't necessarily appropriate for the discussion, right? What are you dating? What methods are you using to date it with? Well, it may not be the right one. And that's a whole other topic that better minds have done in better ways. So if you're really interested, people like Aaron Ra is a good source. Professor Dave Explains is a good source, but he's also got a certain amount of vitriol that I'm not always excited about. He definitely has videos where he can just convey the information, and he does a good job at it. But he also has a lot of videos where he is arguing with people who, definitely have a different mindset, and they will attack, and he will attack, right? It's interesting for a while, and then it's not. But Professor Dave has a lot of videos out if you're interested in getting into some of the nitty-gritty of how this stuff works. Aaron Ra can also he doesn't get vitriolic necessarily. He has a definite way of presenting himself that's more calm and more direct. I will admit he looks like a sleepy dark wizard. His eyes, if you know Jim Brewer, who was apparently a right-wing nutjob now, I did not expect that or see that coming. He always has that look that he's high, even though he doesn't smoke weed. Aaron Ra has a similar look to him. He's a high dark wizard is what I see him as. And he does a great job, and he's got a wealth of information and knowledge that he shares out, and it's really detailed and epic. And I think those are two of the better sources that I'm aware of as far as what YouTube has available. Obviously, there are other evolutionary biologists and whatnot that would even be better, or you get textbooks. It's really a matter of how you want to consume the information. Look at what I Terry. I feel like the conversation has evolved. So, and the people who purport this, the Earth is 6,000 years old or whatever, roughly. Show me the evidence, and I'll change my mind. And you show them evidence, they're like, well, that evidence is, those people are lying. Okay? You have zero proof about any of your stuff. And there's a lot of studies and proof about the other stuff, but okay, they're lying. They're all lying, and you're the smartest person on the planet. Sure. Which goes to a different set of psychological circumstances where a lot of the people that follow them probably just want to belong and feel like their faith is justified, feel like the labels that they all apply to themselves is correct, and that they're all on that same side, as it were. And look, there are some elements to faith, which is hope, that are, they're worthwhile. I think that they can be risky. I think that there are certain times when you are, especially if you're up against a really emotional decision, and you have the experts who are familiar with the situation, who are advising you to do one thing, or they're suggesting, in some respects, that this decision might be the best for everybody, and you are in either a certain level of denial, or you desperately don't want to make that decision. And I think the issue becomes, when is it right to make that call, or is it right to not make it, to just let things ride out? And that goes back to my other commentary about decisions being beneficial or detrimental and how they affect other people, which requires more thought and um, visuals. But you know, who's to say, right? I mean, I think that I would definitely make a different decision than some other people would, and it could be wrong. It could be wrong for those affected. It could be wrong for me, or it could be wrong for the person that I think should make the decision that I would make. I mean, I think a lot of what really drives the division between people isn't just necessarily where people come from, but it's, well, I mean, there's definitely some of that. There's definitely some of that tribalistic, you know, origination or origin, uh, you know, of the other, hatred of the other, but also people out there don't live their lives the way you would. You know, we say it's, well, yeah, no, that's right, that's right. I don't think I have a different way to word that. But hatred of, you know, trans people, or just living a life that you would not live, right? When we talk about race, which is also a ridiculous concoction, we're talking about skin tone, and we're talking about where people are from, even, which I also find kind of dumb. Uh, hating, hating the Irish and the Italians, like we did earlier in the United States, because they weren't correctly white. It's still racist, but it's based on origin and not skin tone. It's just insipid stupidity. So yeah, I mean, faith can be useful for people. You know, again, hope. For some people, that's all they got. For some people, that's all they can do. People with a survival instinct, I don't know if they necessarily have hope, but they have faith in themselves. If they, to some extent, right? I mean, they have to keep going forward, to keep going through the things that they've gone through, to keep moving. I know a few people that have that in them, and it's something to be proud of. It's something to kind of to laud them for. And you know, the dark side to that is, of course, there's enough stuff that goes wrong for them that they are that person, but they continue to push forward. And it's not always easy for people to do that. You're not all wired to be able to do that. And you know, I think the blaming people for not doing the thing that you would have done is, look, it can be useful in a conversation to suggest that, hey, I probably would have done this. Cool. I can't do it now. That situation has changed. But, you know, if a similar situation arises, it's not a terrible idea to have some advice from someone else, some thoughts on how they would have done it differently, or a different way to see that circumstance. But there's a difference between offering and a lot of this comes to tone and how we talk about, how we question, how we ask questions, how we give people information, how we receive information from people. But is it that we're judging them to their face? Is it that we're trying to provide an observation? You know, a lot of it comes to context and intent. Some of it is tone. Some of it is how the person perceives the tone or what their biases are about the situation, right? I'm sure plenty of you have examples of where I've been presented with something and I've gotten upset about it. And your intent wasn't to upset me, it just did. And that's not your fault. It's not your fault that I'm upset by it. It's your fault that you said it, but it's on me for doing what I did with it and feeling, you know, personally attacked, or twisting it in my own brain to feel personally attacked. Um, and not for nothing, I've also been accused of reading into things because it's over text versus being in person. And there's definitely, I think, a truism to the idea that being online, whether you're anonymous or not necessarily, you're still just words on a screen. It's not always easy to convey your intent or your context or your emotional state. I've learned to try to do that with people, but, you know, how are they taking it? How are they reading it? So communication, it's a whole other issue. But when we think about labels and faith, right? We think about how we have decided a thing is, and what we're going to do with that. That's all. It's all part of our own experiences, our own biases, our own mental state, our own emotional state, trying to uh, take over and ruin what might not be a problem. And that's part of why I over-explain myself a lot of times, because I feel like there's always a question, and I try to get as much as I can out, not to prevent being asked a question, but maybe to provide enough insight into what I'm actually thinking that maybe it brings on a different question, or I don't know. I guess I'm trying to avoid the question, but not in a don't ask me a question way, but just in a maybe I already answered it. Or maybe I can answer it before it's been asked. And then you can have a different conversation. We can ask deeper questions. That doesn't always work, but I still try. I still feel like it has to be as much detail as I can offer. It's a lot of why I try to give some kind of historical context to some of these things, at least as far as I'm aware. And I will correct them if I look them up. I'll try to correct them. And not for nothing, I think a real key to solving a lot of the issues that I talk about is education. It is gaining knowledge. It is being open to the possibility that you're wrong about something. And that's not a reflection on you as a person. It's a reflection on just the ideas that you happen to have at the moment. Right? You weren't born knowing everything. There's no such thing as revealed knowledge, right? You have to learn, and you have to be choosy about your sources, which can also be difficult. I mean, I'm going through this experience of realizing that some of the people that I've attributed a lot to turned out to be not awesome, not great people. I had known it first. I didn't realize it. I wasn't close enough to it to see the signs. I was just trying to learn new ideas, and I think all that I've really been able to get out of it is that some people are a good springboard, right? At least I've gotten something out of it. Like, I'm not going to deny morality without a deity, just because Sam Harris is probably a little more racist than I thought. It's a problem, sure, and I will likely attribute where I feel it's important that I got this originally from Sam, but I found other people that corroborate this aspect of his thought. It's tough. Oh, baby, it's tough to. I'm trying to remember if it was a sketch or something, or if it was part of a show or a movie. But there was something that I saw years ago where it became pretty obvious that if you, at least for the characters and when I was watching, that if you are constantly worried about the social injustices associated with a service or a shop or something, you won't get anything. Right? It'll be impossible to do anything. What was it? Free trade coffee? Okay. Where does it come from? Well, under what circumstance were those people actually picking the beans? And then the people running it, are they pure? Are they the kind of person I would want them to be? It can become a real problem, a real nuisance. Like if I really wanted to take my complaints about the genocide in Israel to an absurd degree, I'd have to leave the country because I pay taxes, and taxes are what's going to funding a genocide. Right? You have to find a place to draw the line, and I think it's worth having the discussions, and it's worth complaining about these things. It's worth bringing these things up. But I think we have to be careful on how far in we get with these certain ideas, with these certain elements that we have faith in, that we do label as something that is is good. And I'm sure if we look back on the things that I've said and the things that I'm going to say, yeah, we can pick all that apart to argue the very things I'm talking about right now. That it sounds like I'm going too far in one direction, and it's probably fair. That's why, again, I try to keep things a little broad because, when we talk about, especially when I'm going to be talking about more moral philosophy, I think that there are certain core tenets that are good for people to latch onto, and I think they're good for people to consider. And then I think there are elements that people are going to think differently about, and they're going to want to, choose either a religious standpoint or political standpoint, or even a purely scientific standpoint. And I can't change their minds, right? But I think if we give a little more thought to what it means to share this planet with all the people and all the animals and all the whatever, sometimes you're going to make choices. Sometimes you have to see things in a different way. I think it's one thing to be respectful of the world that you live in, and another thing to do a lot of what we do now. I think we have too many cars on the road, probably. But I feel like electric cars would be a better use of our time, kind of. But the batteries don't last forever, and then what do we do with those, right? But if we don't have a sense that we need to do something better, then we won't. We won't ever look to try to do something better. We won't look to try to figure out other ways to handle what we're doing now. And we're up against people who believe in capitalism. They believe in their power and their greed. So a lot of the ideas that are out there for renewable energy sources get shot down because it's not financially feasible. Or it is, but the problem is the oil companies who have a stranglehold on the energy economy or whatever, they have a problem with that. And they don't want to lose their foothold. Because again, and I don't believe this is a statement of faith, I think that we've proven this out over the course of millennia now, the love of money is the root of all evil. I feel like that's a precept we can all get behind and really understand. So I got to put some of that together. Anyway, I guess what I'm driving at is to pick up my child. But what I'm talking about is faith in and of itself is not a four-letter word, but it does require us to be mindful of how we use it. It's just another tool. Whatever word you want to attribute it as: hope, denial, delusion, belief. How are you using it? And are you using it to better yourself, better the world around you? How are you using it? How are you using what you believe in? Are you using it to drag other people down? Maybe it's a bullshit belief. And even in that regard, how are you pulling other people down? Like, I would use my belief system to pull people down who are, anti-trans, who are racist, who are misogynist. I would love to use my belief that they're full of shit to remind them that they're full of shit and to explain to them in some level of detail why they're full of shit, starting with, you're full of shit. I mean, I'd be polite. I'd probably do it a little differently, but I feel like the message would still be understood as they are full of shit. I think we're in a difficult space. I think we've grown into a difficult space, and it's hard to have faith that we can fix that we can change that we can grow as a society, as a people, as a global collective. Something else that I need to look into called Rawls' original position, which I believe is a philosophical standpoint or a philosophical thought experiment wherein you kind of define how, in your ideal circumstances, what the world would be like. And one of the big keys to that is not knowing what your place would be in that world, not knowing what your gender or financial situation would be in that space. You're potentially in it. Maybe you're not. I don't know. I don't have a problem with it necessarily. I don't have a problem with that. Are the lines even here? Can't even tell. How would you define a world? It's an interesting exercise. I have to look more into, but I feel like I've said enough. Probably too much. Probably not enough. So until next time, toothers, brush, floss, water pick, whatever. Take care of your teeth.